Okay, good evening. It's 5:30. Just remind you that we're being live streamed, so use your microphones. I've got apologies from Councillor Waddle and Councillor Nalo, possibly lateness from Taku. Not sure what's happened to him. So I'll move those apologies. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Ford. All those in favour? Those against? Carried. Move to public forum. Martin Gregory, would you like to come up? Have a seat. 10 minutes? 5 minutes, sorry. Okay, thank you. Jack will take that. Could you turn your microphone on? Just push the... Yeah. There we go.
Is that all right?
Yes, you've
Good.
got 5 minutes. Thanks.
Okay. Well, this is about the voting method for the next triennial elections. I wrote to the Mayor and Councillors shortly after the 2019 elections on this subject, and the Mayor said she told me that the Council would consider this question in 2021. So here we are. The methods of voting are governed by the Local Electoral Act and the Local Electoral Regulations. And under Section 9 of the regulations, the authorised voting methods are A, postal voting, B, booth voting, and C, a combination of booth and postal voting. The default is postal voting. Under Section 36 of the Act, a council wishing to adopt booth voting must pass a resolution to do so. One of the differences between postal and booth voting is the voting period. The voting period for booth voting on polling day is between 9 a.m. and 7 p.m. The voting period for postal voting is 22 and a half days, ending at 12 noon on polling day. Booth voting can also take place before polling day, but I'm not specifically seeking that. One of the undemocratic features of postal voting is the early voting that is permitted. If electors vote over 2 weeks before polling day, it is unlikely they will have received all the information that candidates for election deliver to letterboxes or on doorsteps. They will not hear or read the public debate that takes place in the news media, at forums and public meetings. Those events take place right up to polling day eve. Early voting based only on 150-word candidate statements misses out on engagement in the democratic process, I submit. The cutbacks of postboxes by New Zealand Post has left posting voting papers not an easy matter. In Cannons Creek, for example, the only postbox is within Cannons Creek Library, accessible only during library hours. Ranui's sole postbox is out of sight at the Z service station. In these circumstances, people not near a postbox and without their own transport are disadvantaged. Young people are unused to dealing with paperwork by post. Within that generalisation, I would make a distinction by social class. Young people in affluent households are more likely to be better organised to deal with voting packs than young electors in overcrowded homes where voting packs are more likely to remain unattended to or be lost. Booth voting has several advantages. Firstly, there is clarity in the public mind on when voting takes place, on polling day. Secondly, booths can be set up in local neighbourhoods, at primary schools, for example, within walking distance of electors' homes. And booths can be set up at popular locations, such as North City Mall. Thirdly, the voting period on polling day itself extends to 7 p.m., giving much longer time for people to vote on polling day. I just remind you what I said earlier, that postal voting ends at 12 noon on polling day. The demand for voting on polling day is evident from the Council's reports. The report Voting Documents Returns 2019 Elections and also Lindley Bailey's report titled Report on 2019 Local Elections. In those elections, 4,147 votes were cast on polling day before the 12 noon deadline. That was 26.6% of the total votes cast. Ms. Bailey's report tells us that approximately 5,000 votes out of 15,950 received were hand-delivered to Council's ballot boxes in the final 2 days of voting. It is indicative of the shortcomings of the postal voting method that the Council used quasi-booth voting for the 2019 elections. Ms. Bailey's report says that a roving caravan was used at or near retirement villages, tertiary education institutions, and at Plympton and Porirua Bay, where voters could drop their voting papers into a ballot box. In the case of booth voting, candidate profile statements must be issued with the voting document to an elector at a booth voting place. In addition, under Regulation 29.2, the Council may publish candidate profile statements at any time after the close of nominations. Therefore, there is no reason why a booklet of candidate profile statements could not be delivered to all electors well in advance of polling day in order for electors to be well prepared for voting. All considered, booth voting is more democratic given the difficulties of postal voting. If the Council was to consider a resolution to adopt booth voting, it would have to consult Greater Wellington Regional Council and have regard to the results of that consultation. My request is that the Council gives consideration to the voting method for the 2022 elections in good time.
Okay, thank you, Martin. Any questions? Yes, Councillor Trillin.
Kia ora, thank you, Martin. I think a lot of your points are very well made around the benefits of booth voting, and I'm wondering, in terms of if we're deciding the system that we're going to use, why we wouldn't want to give people as many options as possible. And we know there's a big demand for early voting we've seen in general elections. So why not go with the option C there of a combination of both booth and postal voting?
A combination of booth and postal voting would work very well, but I'm anticipating there'd be considerable cost in doing both types at the same time.
Councillor, are we happy?
Thank you. I was just wondering if there would be any appetite to ask our officers to do some work around the cost to do that particular exercise.
We can, and we will as we get close to the election. There's a number of steps that we have to take anyway to confirm the process as we go forward. So we can bring back that advice.
Councillor Hayward.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Martin, for your very informative presentation. You made mention that you weren't expanding on the need to have booth voting over an expanded period of time, if I've understood your submission correctly. Could you explain why you would not support or would not equally advocate that if both booth voting, my apologies, was the exclusive method, why you would want to only advocate it for being on one day as opposed to a prolonged period?
Yeah, I have thought about that. Again, I'm anticipating the greater cost. But I do think that the 22 and a half days, which is allowed for post voting, in my opinion, is too long, and people forget. There's no clarity really on when, polling day is in the public mind. So, I think booth voting 3 or 4 days before polling day, say, would probably work pretty well.
Once up, you've made the point here that a 22-day voting window is too long for local government. I'm just trying to understand, how would that be dissimilar from, I think it's almost exactly the same number of days for central government elections and the advance vote period as a common frame of reference that most voters would understand in terms of the voting process, and knowing full well that in the last general election, more people voted before the election than they did on election day.
That may be true, but one of the issues I'm trying to address is the relatively low turnout in the ward in which I live, which is Eastern Ward. From memory, the turnout was only 31% in Eastern Ward, and I think it was 48% in Northern Ward, to give that sort of range. And I'm trying to address that disparity.
Okay. Thank you. No more questions. So thank you, Martin. We will be looking at it. Thank you. Okay, I've got no conflicts of interest declarations from anyone. No. No notifications of extraordinary business. So confirmation of minutes from the ordinary council meeting on the 20th of May and the extraordinary on the 17th of June. I'm going to move those together, seconded by Councillor Duncan. Are there any issues in any of those? Okay, all those in favour? All those against? Carried. So my report. Obviously, it's been another hectic month this month, and we're about to sign off our long-term plan. I do believe we've got the right balance with the three waters, the climate change, obviously the paid parking in Moana Court. And I want to thank the councillors, the executive leadership team and the staff for the huge effort that they've put into the long-term plan. We've had over 30 consultation evenings and the hearings, so I think you've all done a fantastic job, and it's proved what a great team we are when we work together. And the staff have actually commented that working with you guys is really good, so I do thank you all. The selling of View Road to the iwi is another issue that we've had off our books. Obviously, it's cost the council nearly $2 million in holding costs, repairs, security costs and rates, but I believe it was a fair price paid, and obviously we're going to have houses for locals in the long run, so that was another thing this month. Personally, we've had the inaugural meeting of the Wellington Regional Leadership Committee. We've had our first one, we've got another one tomorrow. We're discussing the three water reforms, obviously. Some of you came in last night and heard that meeting, and the local government reforms, which a number of you are going to next Thursday at the Hut. And then locally, obviously, we've decided on a Māori ward, so we'll go out for consultation on that. Our business month has been huge and successful. Our Love Local Expo and the Growth Forum have been standouts. And obviously we want to thank Minister Robinson and Brad Olsen, Helmut Modlick and Darren Charity and James Ardern for sharing their knowledge with us. I think everybody who attended had a fabulous time, and the other two Māori and Pacifica events that we had in the evenings showed us that we have some amazing women showing us their talents in running businesses in our community while juggling their families and using social media platforms. So I think that's been a standout for me as well. Personally, with a couple of councillors who have come along, we've attended the Silverbrook subdivision, we've had the ballroom dancing, the American Memorial Day, the Italian Embassy event, and then last week the Virtuoso Strings concert, along with the Plymouth Midwinter Swim, which I did not take part in, I just watched, and World Refugee Day. And then last week we had our successful Civic Awards with 12 residents receiving awards, and then our 4 new inductees into the Hall of Fame. And then COVID came again. So we've had a number of things cancelled, but we also blessed the Te Aropico Walkway on Monday. And coming up, we've got the Airport Awards and the Gold Awards. They're back on for July, along with the Pulse game next week. And the really exciting one is the final of the Sal's National Basketball League in July, which is out here. And so after tomorrow, we're going to have a couple of weeks break from having actual council meetings. We've got Matariki to celebrate, and some of us are off to the local government conference in Blenheim. But tonight, we also want to farewell Steve Pereira, whose last meeting, he's going to Whakatane, of all places, to the sun. So, yeah, we farewell you, Steve. So that's the end of my report. Nothing from Taku, he's not here. So we'll move to committee recommendations, and I'll invite Councillor Leggett to.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to move that Council accept the committee recommendations of Te Puna Kōrero of the 3rd of June, being the long-term plan 2021 to 51 deliberations report, long-term plan financial information, and long-term plan key strategies. So I'll move them both together, and also the Te Puna Kōrero meeting of the 24th of June 2021, which was related to City Centre Revitalisation Work Programme, and the naming of Transmission Gully Link Roads at Whitby and Waitangirua.
Sorry, Councillor Trillen seconded. Any issues with anything? All those in favour? All those against? Carried. We move to our first report, 11.1, Strategic Risk Report. I'm going to move it to put it on the table, seconded by Councillor Ford. Have we got someone who's speaking to that one? Yes.
Thank you, Chair. This is really just for noting this one has been through the Audit and Risk Committee a couple of weeks ago. So main things that went on in the sort of quarter leading up to this was the workshop that we had with elected members, and then just sort of looking at changes over the last sort of 6 months really that led into that. So, I've made a few updates to the risk profile there, and am happy to take any questions on it.
Okay. Has anyone got any questions? I know we covered most of it at Audit and Risk. No? Okay, thanks, Alison. Okay, all those in favour? All those against? Carried. We move to 11.2, Adoption of the Long-Term Plan 2151. So I'm going to move this, but we've got an extra recommendation to include the following wording as part of the infrastructure strategy after commercial, industrial and business growth on page 135 of the long-term plan. Have they got copies of this? Infrastructure for future urban zones reads, the proposed district plan identifies future urban zone, including Judgeford Flats, Judgeford Hills and the Northern Growth Area, as the proposed district plan and subsequent variations become operative. We will understand more clearly the level, the type and location of infrastructure investment needed to facilitate development within these areas. The Council will consult the public on this as part of the future LTP processes. There is a possibility that privately led development could come forward with the current LTP period, in which case developer agreements would be entered into to secure funding for enabling infrastructure and would in turn provide clear direction for future LTP processes. So I just want you to note this is changed to additional recommendation that more clearly met the requirements of the National Policy Statement on Urban Development about providing development capacity within the in section of the new recommendation number 5. Original recommendation 5 to 9 now becomes 6 to 10. I hope everyone understands that one. Yep. Okay. So I'm going to move that, and then I'll have a seconder. Don't all raise your hand. Thank you, Councillor. We happy? First of all, I'll ask that the audit report be tabled by Joe. Yep, and invite Grant Taylor, who was online from Ernst & Young, to speak to the report.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening. So the audit report that is being handed out at the moment, you'll notice is signed already by me, so it's been through a QA process with the Office of the Auditor General. You'll notice that it, consistent with the opinion that we issued in respect of Council's consultation document, there are 3 matters which we draw to the attention of readers. Those matters are consistent with the audit reports that have been or will be issued on other local authority long-term plans around the region, and they relate to the status of the central government-led water reform process, the use by Porirua of age information as a proxy for asset condition in respect of the 3 water assets. And the final one, just signalling to a reader with the very significant step up in planned infrastructure spend and the current supply constraints within contractor supply chains, etc. We are drawing readers' attention to the ambition that is in that plan and leaving it for them to make their own judgment as to the achievability of the planned spending. Having said that, we are satisfied through the conduct of our work that the level of spend is well supported with good quality information, the best information Council has to hand. So we're very supportive of the underlying financial modelling that supports the plan. That was all I planned to address in terms of our report, Your Worship, but always happy to respond to any questions.
Any questions there? Councillor Duncan.
Yeah, thanks a lot. I'm just curious, the amendment we've just spoken about, how does that tie in with this Ernst & Young report? And what sort of rating impact does it have?
Well, Your Worship, I'm happy to address in terms of, as part of our work post consultation document, we have engaged with Council in regard to compliance with those requirements of that updated national policy statement on urban development, and we're satisfied your LTP does address the requirements. The substantive requirements, of course, take effect for the next planning round, so it's early days in the rollout of those obligations, but the document you have in front of you does satisfy the requirements as at now, and the wording that I've heard for the first time read out by the Mayor causes us no concern in terms of the document.
And no rate change. Yep. Anyone else got any questions? Okay, thank you. I'd invite Warren Allen to come forward, Chair of Audit and Risk.
Thank you, Your Worship, and good evening, councillors. Very briefly, if I can point out that the Audit and Risk Committee has had the long-term plan as a detailed report on each of its meeting agendas for approximately the last 18 months. So with that experience, and we've had detailed discussions under those agenda items at each of the Audit and Risk Committees, so with that experience and also my involvement with local government in other parts of New Zealand, I make the following comments. This council has done a great job in planning this very difficult process that is undertaken once every 3 years. There's been sort of detailed plans and it's been executed very well in a very challenging time. Certainly from my independent point of view, I was impressed with the level of engagement that you had with ratepayers, the number of submissions, and then the number or the percentage of those submissions that actually attended the hearings, and then to see the council listen to that input from the ratepayers and work that through in the deliberations and the change to the plan that you're looking at approving today. Certainly the audit has been done very thoroughly. The Auditor General has made it very clear this year that they were going to take much more detailed view over certain aspects of the long-term plan. And Your Worship, I would like to point out that the 3 points that Grant Taylor referred to in his audit report are no way a reflection on the Porirua City Council. You know, the first one is drawing, as Grant said, the reader's attention to the Three Waters reform. Every local authority in New Zealand has that emphasis of matter. The second one in relation to using age as a determinant of the condition of the assets, again, that is somewhat out of the hands of the City Council. And then the final one is really talking about the ability of their market to rise to the occasion for the huge amount of increased work that this plan is putting out. So it's really important, as I say, to understand that this is no reflection on the council. And I think you've got a plan in front of you that encapsulates the best information that's available at the time and will serve the council well going forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Any questions for Ron? No? Okay, thank you. I'd just like to say that obviously there's been a lot of staff involved in the development of this long-term plan, and this one was ably led by Joe Devine and Nikki Thridge, and we've got some special mentions because Graham Grieve, who does all the numbers, Zach, who's made sure the rates can actually be struck, Samuel McMillan, who's travelled everywhere with us for all our community engagement, Kieran Carolyn, David Downs, the Democratic Services team and the Cons team, and Harriet Bailey for design. And there's so many others who actually did help out, but this is months of work that was squeezed into a very tight time. So it's a big thank you to Wendy and her team, I think, from all of us around the council table. So with that, does anyone want to say anything before I put the motion? You do? Councillor Morrell?
Thank you. Look, I've thought long and hard about this, and I'm actually going to be voting against it. Okay. The reason for that is I can't, for the life of me, vote for it when we bought in things like the living wage and riparian planting rights, etc. And it would go against my conscience if I actually voted for the long-term plan. I acknowledge all of the work that has been done, and hugely, and I know that it's a huge undertaking. I commend all the officers. I've got nothing against any of what has been done, and I commend them for doing that. But I can't, for the life of me, vote for a rate increase, which this is generating, based on what I voted against at the original at the meeting of the committee meetings. The other thing that really bugs me, and it's come about recently, is the huge amount of money that we have to spend as ratepayers. And I know we get some of it back. Don't you? I'm going to bring it up, and I'll bring it up again. And it's our ratepayers' money, $5 million for a resource consent or 2 resource consents for 2 things that we currently use, and there is absolutely we will continue to use them, and yet the process is going to cost us, our ratepayers, $5 million plus to keep those, and that $5 million would be better spent, or $4 million, if it was $4 million, would be reduced, would be better spent putting it into infrastructure than creating a whole pile of paperwork saying, well, yes, you can continue to use the tip. So I'm going to, as I say, I acknowledge all the work that's been done, but I can't, on my conscience, vote for it when it includes things that I'm clearly against.
Would you like to tell the viewers what the resource consents you're talking about are? Which ones?
Resource consents are for the landfill. And I know we get landfill charges, but it's still $3 million, and the wastewater treatment station. Those 2 items, it costs $6 million. Well, it will be $6 million by the time we finish. That we have to pay to the regional council just to keep those 2 things going. And I just think that's an absolute deplorable waste of money. Majority. I know there's got to be a process, but a $6 million process, I just cannot stomach that.
I don't think any of us disagree. Anyone else now that he's opened it up? Yes, Councillor Trillin.
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't actually have any comments around the substantive decisions within the LTP. I think I made all those comments during deliberations. I just wanted to comment actually on the process that we went through and acknowledge the officers, the leadership that you showed, Mayor Baker, and actually other councillors as well, and that I found that even as a first-term councillor with a very steep learning curve, the process that we went through I found to be very accessible. I thought that as councillors we had lots of opportunities to have input both before The LTP was initially drafted and throughout the consultation process and around changes and amendments as well. And as a result of that, the things that I campaigned on and was really passionate about, things like climate change, we were able to get in there and actually have those really constructive discussions. So I found the process to be one that was incredibly cooperative, and yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge everyone involved and thank everyone for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, no further comment. So I will, oh yes, Councillor Hayward.
Kia ora kura matua me, nā member katoa I tēnei pō. This folder here is but a fraction of the amount of material that's been produced over several months in the production of this long-term plan. It incorporates council officers' recommendations, deliberations and, feedback and submissions from the community, our own deliberations as councillors, and tonight we get to vote up or down on this issue. I know also that this is the last day we can get this done, because tomorrow is a new financial year, and I love a cliffhanger as much as the next Joker. That said, I will not suspend anybody else, create any suspense by saying that I will be voting for the LTP. No. Well, come on, we'll carry it anyway. I do think that this is the last opportunity that, as a councillor, I'll be able to have formally voice my kōrero, my whakaaro on this issue. So I think there's probably three observations I'd make. The first one is that I understand that there's this, as Councillor Trilland said, it is as much about the process, getting the process right, as it is about making the right decisions. I reiterate your comment about thanking our council officers and staff for the work that they have done in trying to get this extremely valuable project to a close. I also like to specifically thank those staffers who went and checked my numbers to make sure that my calculations were accurate, especially on issues like debt. I guess it would be important for me to say, because I don't think I'm the only one, just my concern about the overall participation by the community in regards to the submissions for the LTP. And I've said this so many times before, so I'm going to say it one more time, that just because people are not participating in this process and putting those submissions in should not be seen as a signal of contentment. In Māori and Pacifica communities, it can be seen as a signal of content. And so, therefore, I think as elected representatives, we should be very mindful of what signal they're trying to send us. That said, I thought there were many things in the process that I did like, and I think if I indicate a couple of them, I did think that the Friends of the Submitter service was a very positive inclusion. Furthermore, the session with our refugee and migrant community. I was set at a table with members of our Laotian community, and Sula Fonfale was a translator for us, and they gave their feedback. And when it came down to what was the most important thing affecting the city, they said that it was the quality of our water, and I tend to agree. The second thing I'd say is that in the end, we are all elected by our communities to serve the city, the whole city. And that for me, the philosophy is that I'm not just here for myself, I am here for those individuals who have to live with the tangible impacts of the decisions we make around this table, those who live here and work here. I would want to take a moment to acknowledge all those individuals who I mentioned during the deliberations that dwelled on my mind during that time period, from Ngāti Toa to Cyril to Joe to Dajub and Mac, Kat and Jamie, actually, Hohepa did not come up. But I would say Cyril, John Hannon, Hannah Pilkington Ching, Link Graham, Anne Goodman, Salota and TJ. Finally, I think I learnt more about my council colleagues as a consequence of this process. We don't always agree on things, and you don't get everything you want in this process. But I remain hopeful in the notion that we all do care about the future of our city, and I know that our paths may not necessarily be as different as we might to think. For instance, with Izzy, who shared her story about her mum, and her mum's story is very similar to my mum's story. So I thank you for sharing that, Izzy. Likewise, Councillor Morale, I have some appreciation, an enhanced appreciation for voting no on things because my conscience will not allow it. I have some sympathy for you tonight because I understand why conscience is important. So I thank you for showing that and helping me as well. I guess the only thing I'd say is just, I'll give a karakia. Nō reira, kua mutu o mātou mahi mo tēnei rā. Mana ki tia mai mātou katoa, o mātou hoa, o mātou whānau, o tātou taone nui, ai ao ki te aorangi, haumi e, hui e, tae ki e. Kia ora.
Kia ora. Thank you. Councillor Leggett.
This is not a criticism, Jeff, but I won't take as long as my long-winded friend here. I just wanted to say that, positive. I just wanted to say that I think we've come up with a balanced LTP, and even though you and I didn't agree with everything either, I think we have made some, there's been give and take, and we have made the right decisions. What I am particularly proud of is I think we've made the right decisions particularly in terms of the things I'm interested in, Three Waters and roading. And along those lines, I think it's clear that we are continuing down that path of gathering information about our assets. Councillors, you'll note that we've just had an email tonight from Wellington Water talking about high criticality assets and some of the inspections that have been made on those high criticality assets and the information that we're getting about that, which will help us be more targeted in the things we do in that Three Waters area in the future. So I think well done to everyone. I think it's a good result.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to move the motion. All those in favour?
Aye.
All those against? We'll record your vote. Okay. We move to 11.3, which is the long-term plan setting of the actual rate. I will move that to put on the table, seconded by Councillor Duncan. Any discussion on this? Is fairly straightforward, but any discussion? Anyone? No. Okay. All those in favour? All those against? No. Okay, we'll record that as well, Councillor Morrell. Thank you. So now I'm going to move that we go into public excluded, please. So someone will second that. Councillor Sauli. We'll just wait for the